Hey guys, Mr. Breen here, and in this video I'm going to talk about price discrimination. A short way of defining price discrimination would be to say that it's when a company charges different people different amounts of money for the same product. Let's put this, though, in the context of a supply and demand curve. So let's say that you have this supply and demand curve. Okay, so here's your demand curve, here's your supply curve. Here's price, and here's quantity. Now you know that in a perfectly competitive market, the equilibrium price will be there because that's where quantity supplied and quantity demanded are the same. But for a monopolist, we would know that your marginal revenue curve is actually downward sloping, so it's not just the straight line that is the price, and we know that the supply curve is the same thing as the marginal cost curve. And so we also know, and I'll do this in blue, that this is the amount of production that would happen. This is the quantity they would produce, the supplier, and the price would be wherever that intersects the demand curve. Okay, so this would be the price. Now, with price discrimination, what happens instead of this monopoly situation is that this firm that either is a monopoly or can act in some ways like a monopoly, instead of just charging one price, they could also charge a different price to these people who aren't willing to pay this much, okay, but they only will charge this much to these people. Okay, so everybody who's willing to pay this much or above is still going to pay this price, but people who are willing to pay that much will pay a slightly lower price, and people who are willing to pay, say, that much will pay a slightly lower price until we get here, because they're not going to ever sell this unit, okay, because people are only willing to pay this much, but it costs that much to make. So this way, the business can actually make more money, and more consumers can purchase this good than otherwise would be able to. So actually, even though discrimination sounds bad, right, and it usually is bad in most contexts, price discrimination allows more people to have access to goods than would otherwise have access to those goods. So who can actually do this? Not everybody can do it, right? A perfectly competitive firm couldn't do it because they don't have any price control. Okay, they have to charge whatever that market price is. If they charge a little bit less, then they're going to actually lose money, and if they charge a little bit more, nobody's going to buy anything from them. So you have to have what's called market power, and another word for that is price control. So monopolists can do this. Okay, oftentimes other kinds of businesses can do this. They have some control over price, like oligopolies or even maybe monopolistically competitive firms. Another condition that has to be fulfilled is that you have to be able to easily identify different groups. Okay, there has to be some way to select for them, somehow. So you have to be able to identify people who are willing and able to pay more and make them pay more, and identify people who are willing and able to pay less and make them not pay as much. Okay, the final condition is that this good has to be difficult to resell. Well, the reason for this is pretty simple. So let's say that the normal price you charge is this. Okay, that's the normal price you charge. And let's say that the lower price that you charge is there. So some people are getting like a rebate, okay, they're benefiting from price discrimination, and they only buy it for that much because they're not willing or able to pay the higher price. Okay, if it's easy to resell this good, then these people are going to buy the good for a low price and sell it to these people for some intermediate price there. So they're going to make this amount of profit, okay? And you're not going to have anyone paying this price. Everyone will pay this lower price, and your whole scheme will not work. All right, so what are some examples of this? Well, one would be, say, senior discounts. Senior discounts. People who are living off of retirement funds might not be willing or able to pay as much, so you can have somebody, it's easy to identify who they are, you just have them show you their driver's license, and if they're above a certain age, then they get a discount. Notice this is almost always for things that would be difficult or impractical to resell, like coffee or something like that. Same thing for, say, student movie tickets. So many of you guys may have taken advantage of this. A lot of movie theaters, if you can show a student ID, will offer a lower price for tickets, which are difficult, again, to resell or impractical to resell. Okay, because they believe students might not have as much money as other people, but it doesn't cost them anything to let you into the movie. Okay, another example might be things like kids fly free, right? Some people do this, or kids stay free, right, at a hotel. Okay, so oftentimes parents are not willing or able to pay as much for seats on a plane as, say, business people would be. So for the business people, it's a fairly, for them, it's a fairly inelastic demand good, because if you need to make a business trip to St. Louis, then you have to do that. But for parents, if they're going to go on vacation, they don't have to do that. And if the price is relatively high, they might just stay home. But again, it doesn't cost anything extra to put an extra person on your plane. And it's actually impossible to resell tickets. So this is a nice money-making scheme for airlines as well. Another good one from back in the olden days of electronics were just electronics rebates. Okay, there were some companies that were very involved in. They would say, well, here's the sticker price, but here's the price after rebates. And what you would have to do is you'd have to fill out some form, maybe a bunch of forms, and then mail them to their rebate processing office in, Phoenix or something. And they figured, well, people who are relatively wealthy aren't going to spend any time filling out these rebate forms, so they'll just end up paying the higher price. But people who otherwise wouldn't buy the product, they might still be willing to pay more than the cost of production, and they'll take the time to fill out those forms because their time is otherwise not as valuable, and they ended up getting a lot more rebate forms than they thought they would. But these are all various kinds of price discrimination schemes that are being done by firms with market power.